Hello everyone, my name is Ryan and welcome to a new video in the Pro Game Review series. Today I will be reviewing one of the recent games in the 2019 Samsung Cup in a round of top 8 between actually two of my favorite players, Park Junghwan, 9-dan professional from Korea as white, against Tang Weixing, 9-dan professional from China. So first a little bit about these two players. Park Junghwan is probably one of the strongest players of all time. He's been ranked top in Korea actually since 2012. And his status has recently been challenged by Shinjin-so since maybe the middle of 2018. Park Junghwan is also known as I don't lag, or I don't ka 1. Because he used that username anonymously, and many players were scrambling to figure out who this really strong Korean player is, and of course it's #1 of Korea at the time, Park Junghwan. So he became pro in 2006, and when he was 13, and he became 9-dan professional in 2011 after winning the Fujitsu Cup against Chojun. And he is a 4-time world champion, winning shortly after the LG Cup in 2015, the M. Lily Cup in 2018. Actually, that was from 2017 to 2018, and the Chunlan Cup in 2019. He's also a 2-time Ing runner-up, which many think that it was a little unfortunate for him, and he was definitely the favorite when he was in the final at the time. So in the block player for this match, we have Tang Weixing, 9-dan professional. He's actually known as the man of the Samsung Cup. So, and that's because of his very amazing performance ever since he won the Samsung Cup in 2013. He's also known as a nemesis of non-Chinese players, which is kind of interesting, I think. And I've actually asked around, and it seems like many agree of this feature, because during the league tournaments, Tang's performance is usually very mediocre even though he's in the A League. But as a world champion, his win to loss ratio isn't very high. While in the international tournaments is typically where he shines. So after becoming pro in 2006, also when he was 13 years old, he became 9-dan professional after winning the Samsung Cup in 2013. And although he quieted down for a few years after that, he then went on to win the Ing Cup in 2016, which was a huge upset over the favorite Park Junghwan. And then this year, recently, he later won the Samsung Cup. So he is just an amazing performer during the Samsung Cup. He won it 2 times. He was a 2-time runner-up in 2014 and 2017, and he also made it to the top 4 in 2 other years. So basically, if you look in the Samsung Cup, you'll probably see this guy. So in terms of style, I feel like Park Junghwan is one of the most well-rounded players of all time. I actually had a chance to play against him twice, and he is basically an upgraded version of Lee Chung-ho. Tang Weixing's style is very interesting. I would say one of the most unique. He can be quick to fall behind in the opening, but his endgame is arguably one of the best in the world. And although not the most stable, so he is famous for making the mid-game to end-game as complicated as possible and seeking chances therein. And he's very good at handling these very misty and complicated situations. And he's won actually the most recent Samsung Cup in this way. So if you're interested in looking at the finals games, leave a comment and I will review those as well. Without further ado, let's dive right into the game. We have Tang Weixing playing black. And Park Junghwan playing white, he actually likes to play star point and 3-4. Actually, many players these days play 2 star points as white to avoid the low approach and to keep the game more simple. But I guess this is just a preference of Park Junghwan. So here black opens with the fine art opening. And this is slightly different from the low or the large knight's move, Shimari here. And there's the subtle difference is that this is about minus 2% win rate, less win rate. So actually a lot of pros like to play the 2-space high now. It kind of gives themselves the mentality, or raises it a little bit, that, I'm not going to lose the win rate and, we'll just keep playing. But I think in terms of the differences, there isn't too much, except the low Shimari has this attachment, which gives white an easy way to settle the right and reduce black's moyo on the lower side. Also, it gives the possibility of an attachment here. Now, this is very complicated. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is a way of reducing black's development towards the center as well. So in the game, black played the 2-space high, and actually white's played the low approach. So if white plays the high approach, then we'll just have this joseki in the low right, which most of us are probably familiar with. White would extend here, and then black will usually approach corners first and then eventually come back, if black has sente, to this move. So actually, yeah, this joseki is where black just takes a lot of territory and then tries to reduce white's influence in the future. So actually, this shape is not so good. So actually, in the joseki in the lower right is typically preferred by black, which is actually why many players don't play the 1-space high pincher anymore, actually. And the reason for this is that you can compare this with another joseki. So, for example, if I just have a star point here, then, so obviously if white approached white, black wouldn't kick, but it's comparable to this joseki, except black's corner is much, much weaker and has a lot more problems later. So if you compare that to the one that we just had, this is very similar, except black's corner is super solid. So if you just compare those two, it would seem that this is definitely more preferable for black and less ideal for white. So yeah, so in the game this didn't happen. White, you'd play the low approach, and black didn't choose the fighting variation. So actually, black can usually pincer, but then this will result in very complicated fights where if white plays the knight's move, then black would push and cut, and then a fight will quickly start. So actually, quite a few games have been played like this, and personally, I still haven't figured out this variation yet, but it would seem that. But what's for sure is that when this stone is closer, this is more preferred for black, and if this black stone at Q7 is instead at Q8, then this is typically more preferable for white, which I think makes sense. So instead, black just played the knight's move, and all things would seem normal. And then white pincers here. So this is actually a move that's seeks more efficiency. So if white just extends here, probably white isn't satisfied, and white likes to give black a little more pressure. For example, if black approaches here, and then if white plays here, then later the extension on this side would be very big. So probably before playing this pincer here, white already anticipated that black will approach, and then white plays the kosumi. So this move is actually a very annoying move when black plays the 2-space high enclosure here. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time in the opening because what's the essence of the game is really what happens later. And we can see Mind Master Tang really taking advantage of his later game tactics. So here we have an approach and white ignore. So if white defends here, black will certainly attach and double Hane and play out this variation. So the idea with this is that if black were to get out on this side, then white's pincer here will get devalued. So if black just plays Kosumi and escapes, there's not really much to gain for white on that side. So, for example, let's say black plays here, then this pincer will lose a lot of will lose value, because if we just both jump out, white's not really gaining too much with influence that's facing the lower side. So instead, white pincers here directly and ignores black's approach. So here black chooses the high double approach. So if black chooses the low double approach, white will probably attach, and then we will end up in this variation again. So since white played a move here, if black just does this two-space extension, then white would just press this down, and it wouldn't be too exciting for black. So here it's probably O-ring move. The main thing is that this pincer is also going to pressure the two-space extension on the left side as well. So in the game, well, if black plays this, then also it's just facing white's stone, right? So white just pincers here. Not much to gain for black either. So in the game, black played the high attachment. So now we have another variations here. So in here, white basically has to attach. So before we played this Joseki pretty frequently, where black extends here and then plays the knight's move, and basically it's considered this is bad for white. So now white almost always attaches out now. I think it makes quite a lot of sense. So because after the double approach, white doesn't actually control anything, right? You wouldn't really call this bamboo shape influence, because if black descends down here, this is actually going to get attacked. And black's shape is very good on the left side as well. So pretty uncomfortable for white in this shape. So, but when you attach here, you do have to be careful, because then you're going to start a fight. So one of the other variations for this one is black can Hane and extend. And then if white attaches and blocks, then black has a Tsuji locally. So actually remember this shape, because this is actually a very useful Tsuji. When black has two stones here that's getting Atari down, black can play the Kosumi. If black just simply extends, then when white blocks, then this shape is very dangerous. But when black plays Kosumi, it's actually a more volatile shape. So white can't attach on this side, because after black gets this tiger's mouth, white's outside is going to get destroyed. So white has to extend, and now black sacrifices these two stones by making this head-on attachment. This is a very good move to get at white's shape. So white can't Hane, because then this cut, white is dead, because white can't double Atari here. White doesn't have enough liberties. So white has to play a very painful move, and then when black blocks, white also descends. So white captures these stones, but black gets the corner in Sente and has some more Aji over here later. So this is kind of like a Joseki variation, where black gets the corner in Sente, and white also develops some influence and capture these stones. But in this case, obviously this is not going to be a good result for black, because black gets Sente that's facing where white already has a stone, and on the right side, this high move is susceptible to a pincer move here at M3. So this is probably not going to be too good for black. So then black Hanes. And this variation, after white attaches, black Hanes here. So if white keeps extending, then black will come back to connect. And for this shape, getting this push is actually pretty good for black. So after getting some influence on the right side, black comes back to settle the left side. So almost getting both sides here. So instead white attaches, and then when black hanes, here white has two choices. In the game, white plays the tiger's mouth. And then when black hanes, this is actually considered a local joseki by a couple of AIs. Which is kind of mind-blowing, I think, because it just seems really good for black, in my opinion. Just capturing 2 stones. And we used to have a saying that when you capture a stone, our Panuki in the center is at 30 points. If you capture 2, it's obviously not 60, but it's still a super strong influence that's also facing pretty good black stones. Although this is kind of hard to believe, when I look at the win rates, this is actually still about 60% for white. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I just... Personally, I just think this is so good for black, but I'll let you guys judge. Yeah, white does have a lot of territory and gets sente, so I guess it can be considered a relatively even result. The other variation is when white extends here, then when black will invade, and then take the corner. So actually, this is... Oops. So this actually seems pretty good for black as well, because even though there's this wall here, black just got a bunch of stones on the outside. So, but white does get the first move, and white can go to the right side to attack these stones that's getting attached to the wall. So, for example, white can play maybe a move like here. So white also potentially has some sente moves to reduce the corner as well. So this variation is possible, but in this case, because black has stones over here, it's not easy for white to do anything to the right side. Also, we can see that since white has a pincer stone here, this stone would be in a very bad situation because, of course, the left side is going to be devalued after black getting some stones on the second line here. So nobody can make really any points here, which means that this stone's value is going to be less than it was before. So in the game, white plays tiger's mouth, and we have this trade. So white gets territory in sente, and black gets this huge influence on the right side. So, pop quiz. Where should white play now? So there should be a really obvious place on the board right now that white should play. Let's see if you can find it. So I'm going to let you guys test yourself, and I'm going to review the answer in a few seconds. So if you chose the 2-space extension here, you are correct. This is by far the biggest move on the board right now. We can see that here, black has a huge influence on the left side. So if black were to gets more stones on here, then black could really develop not just a side, but a box moyo. So that's going to be highly efficient. So this is by far the biggest move on the board right now. So white makes this 2-space extension. And also, it's really the most empty place on the board because we can see all the corners are pretty much done, and which just leaves this corner that's white stone can be settled with this move. So black jumps, and in exchange for white's enclosure. So these two are pretty much Mia. If black escapes this stone, white would probably come back and Atari this stone. So it actually seems pretty good for white. So this might be the reason why white's win rate is still really high, because white's stones are actually in very good places. We can see after this corner is really good shape. The top left is really efficient. This pincer is really nice, faces the left side, reduces the corner, and we have these 2 stones here. So it's actually difficult for black to get anything big right now. So after this, this is probably another chance for us to see where the best move for black is. So now instead of just throwing out the question, I'm going to give you a few choices. So it seems that this moyo is very big, and I'm sure a lot of us will probably continue to expand this. So for example, if we press this down, that could be a way to expand moyo. Or if you play a move like here, that's kind of an indirect move to threaten the weakness here. For example, there might be an attach and cut later, and also expand this side. But I think doing something like this then would be too close to the influence here. So I'm going to leave this as a choice. And then pincer is also a big move, because when you have a two-space enclosure here, you can develop very easily on this side. And also it puts a lot of pressure on these two stones. So later if black plays the kick here, it's going to attack these two. So that's another choice. The third choice is here. So if black pincers on this side, this would attack this white stone. So this would be the only place for black to initiate a fight right now. And this could potentially starting a fight would be good for black right now, because this influence is just sitting here, and that would be a good way to somehow use it. So, which variation out of the three would you choose? So actually, in the game, black played this pincer. So we can see here that even though you can expand here, this is just one area. And when you just have one area on the board that's relatively empty, it's very dangerous. And I think this concept is very important. For example, if black presses white down on this side, black's going to lose a lot on the right side first. And how confident would black be to really enclose this territory? It's going to be very hard. So if black keeps expanding, then if white just invades here and black can't kill, then it's going to be a loss for sure, because this is the only moyo and it's going to be gone, and white has a lot of territory. So to not let yourself prone to that situation, you should always build more than one side. So because we're really looking for kind of a global efficiency, right? So it's really important to not just look at one area, even though black has a huge influence here, and it's really intuitive to, build this. But when you build it, it's not solid enough. So getting this first, putting pressure on the white stones, is a better choice at the moment. So black can also have this potential, and this would still be here. So putting pressure on the two stones here, then white attaches. So if white goes into the center, so let's go back a little bit. So if white goes into the center, then it doesn't have too many points at the moment. So I guess what white is trying to do is to settle this group first, and later, if everything is alive, then white is free to invade inside. So if this group has some worries, then it's very difficult for white to just simply invade, because then black might be able to attack and entangle two groups together, and that would be a very dangerous situation for white. So white's tactic is just to live in locally and give black the next move. So if black just has to go here to enclose, it's not going to be big enough, because right now the board is still very empty. And if black expands above, then it's still going to probably be prone to invasions later, because it's still relatively empty, and white could have some senti moves on the second line. For example, maybe here, and white can quickly invade this area. So instead, black decided to tanuki instead, which I think is a good choice. So black invades on top first. So after getting this exchange on the right, which is probably good for black, because after the pincer, black is now potential on the right side, and all white gained is settling the group. So that was a good exchange, and then black pincer here. So then white attached, and this is locally a very common way of fighting. So after the attachment, if black hane is on top, then white would extend, and then white could hane and play the tiger's mouth here. So this is locally a good way for white to sabaki. So this is good. It's a very flexible shape, and if black ataris here, white can probably just jump out. So later white can start this ko or play this hane and potentially capture the stone. So this is a very light shape, very light play by white. So in the game, black doesn't want to give white the chance of settling, and black just wants white to jump out, which is the right choice in this situation. So jumping in the middle is good shape here. So actually locally, this is when I ran my AI on this, which wasn't with too many playouts, so I'm not fully trusted. It said to actually hane or jump here. So actually the AI still wanted to gain influence in the middle. And this jump actually lowered the win rate by quite a bit. So I'm not entirely sure why, and I really don't understand what's going on. So in this case, actually, I've noticed this trend is with when you run games with AI and there's a big influence, or when the board is when you're playing with very obvious influence versus territory game, the moves are really difficult to understand. I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but that's kind of like a trend that I've been seeing. And when I review with AIs, these moves become pretty much impossible to understand when there's like an influence like this early on in the game. So I don't fully trust this move right here, because I mean, if black just gains influence in the middle and white gets this territory, then there's still so many entrance areas for white. So the center isn't too big still. Anyway, so after the jump, white protects the cut. So, and then black jumps. And then we have the turn. So this is, we're just seeing a local fight here. So descending directly is a very good asking move, because right now white can't connect. If white connects, then locally black would be alive in the corner. So that wouldn't be good. And it's really important not to push this one. This is super important, because after the push, this hane wouldn't work anymore for black, because that one liberty really meant a lot, because white can wedge through right now. So that sometimes it's really important to keep your liberties, especially in fights. One liberty sometimes could really mean a variation could work or not. So of course right now black has this weakness right here because of that one liberty difference. So descending is a good move. It kind of forces white to also block. And then black lives the corner. Then when white plays knight's move here, black extends and then plays knight's move to control the right side. So after this move, these three white stones at near q15 is already dead. But white does have quite a bit of agi still in the r12 area, so it's still difficult for black to capture the whole group at the moment. So white turns here, and at this point it's already kind of looking good for white. We can see after the fight, white got this very powerful turn in the center, which is very bad for black, because with this influence here, after white gaining stones in the center, it's going to be very hard for black to use this influence and eventually make territory. I mean, we don't use thickness to make territory, but eventually you're going to have to. So without any groups to attack and nowhere to make territory, it's starting to look very dangerous for Tang Weixing right now. And then white attaches in wedges. So the wedge is very important right now. If white connects, then when black connects, then white would never be able to get this push, because then white would just jump, and if white keeps extending, then black can just either make a knight's move or kosumi or connect this way in some way, because these two stones aren't going to be too important anymore. So wedging directly is a powerful forcing move, and then black has Tutari now, and then white can get at this weakness. So right here, white made a few mistakes, and it wasn't even clear to me that these were mistakes until later I reviewed the game, but it kind of makes sense. So white should actually tanuki here. White shouldn't play any moves in this area anymore, because playing immediately, it kind of makes black stronger. Especially after this jump, because if white hanes directly, then, for example, white might be able to cut, and this would force black to live over here, because black obviously can't capture the stone, and white is already caught on the inside. However, after the jump, when black played the tiger's mouth, then black can make this hane. So after this exchange, it actually gave black a way to settle. So after this hane, white can't really do anything interesting. So if white plays here, it's a sente move, but it's really, really bad for shape, because now there is this attachment. And if white plays here, black can also hane, and then this cut will no longer exist. So we really have to be careful not to play some direct sente moves, because they're gonna get you back in the end. But even after this move is sente, which means black can hane here, because if white cuts, black can atari and play this move, and white wouldn't really gain too much if black can live comfortably here, because the outside isn't too important right now. So instead, white played the double hane. These moves actually lost quite a bit of points, because after the tiger's mouth, there still isn't too much to do for white, because there is this push. If black pushes and cuts, white would have to protect the stone here, and then black could push through here. And this was very dangerous for white, because even if white can capture this side, white would lose even more in the two stones in the center. And if white blocks, black could cut. So there's nothing for white to do here. So after white realized white had to block, and then after black ataris, the game kind of swung back already in black's favor. So right now the win rates are approximately 50-50, although this is arguably better for black because the starting win rates is a little bit lower for black. So we can see here that after all of these exchanges, all white got was solidify the corner, but white obviously lost quite a bit of points here, and also black connected back safely. Not to mention there is a hint of a weakness over here, although it's not going to work directly probably, but this does. This is kind of a foreshadowing cut right here. So because if black were to cut immediately, if black were to cut immediately, then white could atari out and then push through on this side. And this would capture the three stones because black can't escape anymore. And this would first lose a big territory, and even though black might be able to do something to the middle group, the loss here is a kind of a precondition, and it's not worth it. So this could be worth it later, but right now it's still too early. So because of that weakness, black has already come back and made this game very even. So here is where the game really starts to get interesting. So white obviously needs to invade somewhere. And since the lower side is the biggest area on the board, white invades right here. And here black starts his show. This is a very typical play by black here. He is very famous for these kind of misty mid-game situation, and he just hands them very, almost perfectly handles them. So here black pushes, and normally this is a very bad move, but this is just so beautiful how the sequence of moves worked. So here black peeps. This is a probe. It doesn't really work because white could just capture it. But after this exchange, black has a lot of possibilities. For one, if black cuts, black can get this in sente and an atari. After that, the corner, black would gain a lot of corner territory, and this group would be safe. Another sente would be later, if black attaches, then, which happens in the game, white's shape is very uncomfortable. So, because later there could be this move over here. So at the moment, this move doesn't really work because white can still handle it by pushing out. And this, even though black captured the right side, the lower side just has been destroyed, so that doesn't really work yet. But this gives a lot of aji, which really helps black in the middle, because this is really the focus. So getting the probe here is really important for black. White doesn't want to connect here, because then it leaves black this attachment. And now white isn't alive, so this is definitely not a good follow-up to leave for black to exploit later. So after this exchange, black attaches. So even though this looked like a strong group, but black was still able to use a probing move to get even more forcing moves in the center, which actually ended up crucial for this fight. So white jumps, and black peeps here and takes away the eye space. So this is a very important move because it's eye space for both sides. So when you're attacking your opponent, it's really important to keep your own eye space and not let your opponent take that from you. Because if black becomes weak, then black's no longer going to be the side that's attacking. So after this move, white actually played a very questionable move, and this is kind of the turning point here. So when Park Junghwan played this, I'm not sure whether it's a mentality thing, because for actually major tournaments, Tang Weixing has been famous for making a dent in many top players' games. I'm not sure it's a mentality thing, but white should definitely not play a move here. This is huge territory, but because we have a fight going on here, Tanukiing here is definitely not the best idea. So what white should have done, what white should have done is definitely settle the center. Either make some extension, jump, or play a move to strengthen this 3 stones. Because since I mentioned that there are also other weak points for white, getting a move here is so important. Not to mention white doesn't need more territory once white is able to live this side. Because again, white has, for example, the top left, the lower left, and the right side. So a lot more territory as of now than black. But white played this move, and black definitely is not going to respond. And here we have the sequence of moves that led to black's victory. So here black plays a sente move. So now this is going to be sente because before, when white connected, there's no longer a cut. We can see this very nicely protects all of the weaknesses on the outside. So this is going to be a sente move. White has to respond, and white can't really respond here because there's still going to be the cut. So then this move is still sente, and that's just way too painful for white. So white responds here, and then black caps. So this is all relatively normal. So this is a very obvious attacking move, right? So if you ignore, I'm just going to attack the 3 stones. And then white plays a sente move and this large knights move. So this move is actually kind of interesting, right? So it's obviously a follow-up move after the Kosumi, but white really can't do anything too good here anymore, right? So because if white were to live here, it's actually really difficult because this stone is actually relatively far. So I think white is trying to continue the train of thought that if black has to kill this very small, then it is definitely possible for white to sacrifice it. However, white is probably neglected one thing. So we can see after black pushes and cut, which is a tsuji, because if white ataris here, obviously then the stone would get cut off. So white protects the cut here. So this is actually another mistake because white should play the tiger's mouth here. This would protect the cut better, and it would be much more difficult because this stone being here is a lot more important for the right side as well. Although this would be bad for the corner Because, so the difference is here that if black Ataris and Ataris here, there is the possibility for white to Atari and then an Atari. So right now this wouldn't work because black got the second line exchange. On the other hand, if white connected, then when black Ataris, then white could potentially counter Atari on this side. So here when white Ataris, then it's going to be a ko. If black connects, then white still has the possibility of connecting back. So that's the subtle difference, but this makes a huge difference on the right side, because later in the game, when white connected, black played this knight's move, and white still had to fix here. But this move, there's no time for this move anymore. After white fixes here, it's pretty much going to be one-sided, because we can see white spent 2 moves on the lower side. Albeit it's very big territory, but black cut this group off in sente. And now black plays the winning move, the push. So now getting this push, it's such a beautiful strategy. So after black gets these moves here, cutting this group off, black then comes back here to cut this. Because after the center stone, even though white can wedge and capture the 3 stones, after black extends and jumps, it's very nicely secured the center territory. And now white definitely has to live something. Because if all of this is black's territory, white's not going to have enough. So this forced white to make this alive. And now we've gone to that situation again, where white just has one goal to live, and black just needs to slay the dragon. So, but we can see black has a lot of strong stones on the outside, and there isn't really too many places for white to make eyes. So, white clamps and resists, but it really isn't enough. So white Ataris here and blocks. So after pushing, again, black is just answering with all the strong stones, all the strong moves required to capture. So I think at this point, white might have had a bit of a chance, but I think it's unclear still, because so we're kind of talking about win rates again. And you always have to be careful, because sometimes when you don't run an AI with enough playouts, they can give kind of misleading win rates. So at this point, I would say it's pretty much over, because it's going to be really difficult for this to live. So black actually sneakily gets this exchange in, which is really interesting, because white can't really answer on that side. This is too big. This actually. So actually black can play the peep instead, and this would capture the whole thing in the top right. So that's not going to work for white, because if white connects, then black then connects, and this is actually locally dead. So that doesn't. But white can't continue this, even though this dragon is kind of on the line as well. So after getting this exchange in sente later, black can get this in sente as well to protect this push and cut later. So after a perfect mid-game fight, black make this exchange and then jumps, and then although white resists, it doesn't work, and after a couple more moves, the game is finished. So after black connects here, Park Junghwan sees there's no way for white to make this alive, and then quickly resign. So in the center, if you're wondering, it doesn't work if white connects, because after black pushes, black could either cut or hana. It doesn't really matter, because here it's actually a seki, which means it doesn't work for white. And the liberty issue doesn't really matter in the center, because this Atari obviously ladders the stone, so white has to extend this way. But then we can now see the magic of this exchange, because black can now Atari and capture the stone. So even though it looks like the liberties, black only has 3 liberties here, but there's actually no way for white to capture the center stones. And if there's no way to do that, there is enough eye space inside. So here, the dragon has been slain. So the end result is very astonishing, but I really enjoyed this game when I focused on this preparation as a black player. Tang Weixing really showed us what you really need as a mid-game player is not to just look at one area of the board and fight, but just look at everywhere in the board, and he just magically probed everywhere and made everything work perfectly in his advantage. So first starting with this probe here, and then this push and cut, which led to white's connecting as a mistake, and then this another push and cut. So very aggressive and direct moves that really gave white no chance to breathe at all. And then getting this extension just in the right time to protect the center weakness that had to do with the cut over here. So, which is so important for a mid-game fight is just your ability to, kind of foresee things. I mean, you don't even have to foresee every variation that had to do with the inside, but just seeing that you could get this fight and it could matter for the center and it doesn't lose any points is probably enough for all of you guys who are watching and me to learn in terms of this game and how to prep for a large mid-game fight before you commit to its consequences. So after this game, Tang Weixing 9-Dan Professional advances to the top 4 players, where he then won against Liao Yunhe, and then he advanced to the finals. So when you watch this video, you probably see the results already. But if you're interested in the finals, I'll be happy to review those as well. So very exciting game. I hope you enjoyed this video and also the introduction in the beginning. And so if you enjoyed the video, give me a like, and I will see you next time in the next pro game review.